The following are instructions for installing a Navigator recirculation system. This system is designed to be a complete recirculation station incorporating a Bradley thermostatic mixing valve, return line, recirculation pump, and all the necessary components to have a properly set up recirculation system for domestic hot water. Let's begin the installation. Before making the connection to the hot and cold supplies, make sure to properly flush these lines to remove all debris. On the left and right-hand side of the valve are check stops. The stop screws must be turned out to be flush with the top of the check stop cap to ensure you have maximum water flow through the valve. The system comes pre-assembled on Unistrut. The entire Unistrut system will need to be mounted to the wall by 8 bolts located inside the Unistrut bars. Once the unit has been attached to the wall, you're going to connect the hot and cold supply lines to the mixing valve. 4 gauges are provided with the NRS system. One is a temperature-only gauge installed onto the front face of the thermostatic mixing valve. The other 3 are combination temperature and pressure gauges. They will be installed on the hot inlet to the mixing valve, the cold inlet to the mixing valve, and the return line just above the recirculation pump. At this point, the system is installed and you are almost ready to start it up. All of the ball valves should be closed or in the off position at this point. The first step to pressurizing the system is to open the ball valves on the hot and cold lines feeding the mixing valve. Slowly pressurize the system by turning both of these valves to the open position. Next, set the temperature on the mixing valve. In order to do this properly, you will need to have water flowing. The Bradley NRS includes a test connection on the outlet side of the valve in order to allow water to start to flow. Simply attach a hose onto this ball valve fitting and then run that hose down into a drain to collect the water. Once the hose is connected, you can begin to set the water temperature. To do this, you will need to remove this screw from the top of the mixing valve with a slotted screwdriver. Then insert a 5/32 Allen wrench into the top of the mixing valve in order to adjust the temperature. By opening this ball valve, you will start the flow through the mixing valve, which will allow you to set the temperature. You will want to get between 5 to 10 gallons per minute flowing in order to properly set the temperature of the mixing valve. Note the thermometer gauge on the outlet side of the mixing valve should start to rise as mixed hot and cold water are flowing through the valve. To set the temperature, use the Allen wrench to adjust the screw. Turn in a clockwise direction for a colder water temperature and a counterclockwise direction for a warmer water temperature. In this case, we are setting the valve to approximately 110 degrees. Once this temperature has been set, close this valve and move on to the next step. It's now time to fill the system with tepid water. First, ensure that the ball valve in the center section of the NRS station is closed in the off position. Then open the ball valve on the outlet side to fill the building with water from the mixing valve. Once the building is filled with water, purge the air from the building line. There is a purge connection on the return line to the valve. This allows you to purge the air from the building line right from the test connection on the NRS station. Once the air is removed from the line and water begins flowing, you can close the ball valve on that connection and then open the ball valve on the return line. Water is now flowing through the entire recirculation system at this time. It is flowing past the pump to the cold inlet of the thermostatic mixing valve and back to the cold inlet of the hot water storage tanks. At this time, you are ready to plug in the recirculation pump, which will then move water throughout the entire recirculation system. Let's take a look at the optional aquastat, which is used to control when the pump turns on and off. To access the timer, pull the cover off from the front face and adjust the temperature so that it is 5 degrees above the outlet temperature of the mixing valve. Once the pump has been plugged in and water is flowing through the NRS system, it's time to balance the system. We'll do this by way of the circuit setter or balancing valve that is located on the bottom of the return line side. The circuit setter has an adjustment knob on the front that allows you to proportion how much water flows through this balancing valve. To fully close the valve, turn this dial clockwise all the way. Turning the dial counterclockwise opens the valve. Adjust this dial so that upon the start of your balance, it is about 5% open. At this time, watch the outlet temperature from the mixing valve and the return water temperature on the return line. If the return line temperature starts to increase in temperature, that means too much water is flowing back to the hot water tanks. You will then need to close the balancing valve by turning the dial slightly in a clockwise direction. If the temperature gauge on the return line side is dropping in temperature, that means that too much water is being fed to the cold side of the mixing valve. You will need to adjust the balancing valve by turning the red dial in a counterclockwise direction, which will allow more water to flow through the balancing valve and ultimately through the hot water tanks. Once you've adjusted the balancing valve, wait for 30 minutes to allow the system to fully balance out. If no further adjustments are necessary, you can lock the balancing valve down by placing a Phillips head screwdriver on the screw and tightening it into a locked position.